Hey everybody, before we begin today's video, you may recall that at the end of the previous video, I said I had a big surprise for the channel in store. Well, now it's time to reveal said surprise. Hope you're ready. Chaos Control! Ta-da! I got an avatar now! It was drawn up by my friend Jack Lockstyle, and he did an amazing job with it. I love it so much, and if there's anyone watching this video who wants something drawn, I strongly recommend his talents. He's especially good with anthropomorphic characters, and his prices are pretty reasonable. Seriously, you won't regret it. Now with that said, on with the show! So in case this is your first video on the channel, or haven't gotten the memo by this point, I really like Five Nights at Freddy's. The character designs are charming and creative, most of the gameplay is super fun, and even though nowadays it's rare to see the games get genuinely scary, the horror is executed well when the games actually try. The story can go f*** itself though. Despite some aspects I like, there are way too many plot holes, inconsistencies, and dumb decisions plastered throughout to rightfully call it good. And all of that has manifested itself in the franchise's latest villain. Allow me to set the scene. Throughout Security Breach Ruin, the DLC of the base game Security Breach, you're on a mission to save your friend Gregory from the depths of the destroyed Pizzaplex. But as you progress, there are certain things that hint towards something not being right. When you finally get down to where Gregory supposedly is, you're met with this.
You saved me! You saved me!
Gregory? I'm Gregory. You're not Gregory. What are you?
I'm Gregory.
This is the Mimic, a robot endoskeleton that heard Gregory's voice throughout Security Breach and was able to recreate it for its own purposes, namely lure Cassie down here to release it from its prison. Now originally, it was built by an inventor to entertain his son while he worked. The Endo eventually learned from watching the inventor's son and became intelligent enough to formulate its own responses based on the kid's personality. However, later on, the kid was tragically killed in an accident and the father was left alone with the Endo still acting like his son. Eventually, the dad got so angry that he lashed out and beat the Endo senseless, but it survived having learned from the violence it was inflicted by. Now, it would eventually go on to do several things, such as brutally murder a team of Fazbear workers sent to retrieve it, and dismember more Fazbear workers after being told to rip off the arms and legs of all the endoskeletons and put them in a pile. But the more important thing is that it eventually ends up down here in the basement of the Pizzaplex. Now, all that sounds like it could make for an interesting antagonist, and to many FNAF fans it is. However, as the title suggests, I am not one of those fans. In fact, looking at everyone else's opinions on this robot, I think I might just be the single greatest mimicator in the fandom, and this video will explain in detail why. I could honestly go on for hours about how much I hate this stupid Endo with every fiber of my being, but for the sake of being concise, I've narrowed it down to 5 major points that highlight the majority of my complaints. So let's not waste any more time and get straight into it. Number 1, it came out of nowhere. Kind of. The previous FNAF games post-UCN have all been centered around Glitchtrap, the reincarnation of William Afton, and Vanny, who was supposed to be William's successor possessed by Glitchtrap. These characters were set up in Help Wanted, and we got to see them both in action in Security Breach. At least we would have if Security Breach was a finished product, but that's a separate issue. Throughout the multiple endings of Security Breach, you can take out Vanny permanently, free her from Glitchtrap's control, or discover and defeat Burntrap, who is the remains of William Afton brought back to life by Vanny. At least we assume as much. Notice how through all of that, I haven't mentioned the Mimic once. That's because the Mimic is not in this game, nor is it in Help Wanted. There's zero mention or hint that the Mimic is even a thing that exists in the entirety of either of these games, so when you get to the end of Ruin and are met with this random robot, you'd justifiably be pretty confused. Hell, they don't even give it a real name outside of the patch notes. Like, who in their right mind introduces the main antagonist as question mark, question mark, question mark? This is our supposed new villain, but it's just a random robot with next to no foreshadowing. Unless you read Tales from the Pizzaplex, specifically the 7th book, Tiger Rock, where you can learn everything there is to know about the Mimic. Yeah, that whole background I gave you about the Mimic, that's locked behind a book that you have to buy if your local library doesn't have it. Like, why? Why would you do this? This is a terrible way to make virtually any sort of story, let alone be used to introduce your next villain. Not everyone is able to read the FNAF books or even knows they exist. So it's an extremely bad move to expect your entire fanbase to have read a very specific book in a very specific series that's different from the other 2 series of books that you already did. Believe me, I should know. I'm in the Sonic fandom, and Sega's been doing this for far longer and to much more infuriating degrees. But Tony, I hear you say, people don't have to read the books. They can just watch a YouTube video from a FNAF theorist that explains what the book is about. Well, yeah, they could, but that creates another issue. Most of the time when a FNAF theorist covers something in a books, they have a tendency to take what's in them and stretch, bend, squash, twist, and throw it all over the place in order to fit their own interpretation of what the franchise is about. It's how you get stuff like Michael and UCN, Mrs. Afton being the main villain, and Robot Vanessa. Things that don't make sense given what is seen in the games, but people go with it just because. Point is, theorists are oftentimes unreliable and even blatantly wrong, so going to them for information on the books isn't a smart decision. The only way to 100% know what the books are about is to read them yourself, and I've already explained why that's a bad thing. TLDR, don't lock important information behind external media. That's how you get another Sonic Forces. Number 2, the Mimic versus Afton debate. Remember how I mentioned that Glitchtrap and Burntrap were reincarnated William Afton? Well, that's what they initially were, and arguably still are. With the introduction and canonization of the Mimic, many fans have theorized and even believed that Glitchtrap, and by extension Burntrap, are in fact not William Afton, but rather the Mimic. Many believe this so much that they insist that this is what makes the Mimic good, and even call it a copycat killer. But other fans are against this as they feel it not only doesn't make sense, but also retcons what they set up beforehand. After all, without the books, the hints towards what Glitchtrap and Burntrap are in the games only leads to them being William Afton again. Now where do I stand on this matter? I'm completely against the idea of the Mimic being Glitchtrap and Burntrap, and genuinely believe that it would be a terrible move to make them such. Now with that said, I'm sure I'm going to get 500,000 Mimic fans in here protesting up and down that their theories are true, despite no official confirmations. So to combat that, I'm going to go over every major piece of evidence for the Mimic being Glitchtrap and Burntrap, prove why they're a load of bullshit, and shoot them in the face for good measure. A. The Mimic cries and drools in the books, and Glitchtrap has tear and drool marks on him. This is a popular retort, but doesn't hold nearly as much water as people think. For one, the tear marks are barely visible on Glitchtrap. In fact, you can only see them in one cutscene in the whole game, and the drool marks are non-existent. Like, where is Glitchtrap drooling here? Because I sure as hell can't see it. Some of you may refer to the goopy form of Glitchtrap from Princess Quest, but that's not proof either because this is just the kind of face that makes goop monsters creepy. It doesn't mean that the Mimic fans are right. B. In the books, the Mimic has its arm in a position of holding a tiger plush, and Burntrap has his arm in a similar position. This one is just a reach that keeps getting bigger the more I think about it. For one, a position like this is the typical position an undead creature makes because not only are they weak and injured, but it also just looks creepy. Also, the arm position is meant to mimic the way the inventor's son held his favorite tiger plush. So could someone please tell me what kind of child would hold their favorite toy like that? When children have a favorite toy, they almost always hold it with both arms close to their chest because it's special to them. It has some level of importance and they treasure it dearly. So why would a child hold their favorite toy as if they were a zombie? That doesn't make any sense any way you slice it. C. The Mimic climbed into an animatronic suit in the books while also crushing a girl's skull who was also hiding in there. This is the smoking gun that a lot of people use as their definitive proof that the Mimic is Burntrap. However, they leave out the part where the animatronic in question is a dog rather than a rabbit, and in the following epilogue, the Mimic just climbs back out and puts on a jester costume for some reason. Yeah, that's totally proof. Not to mention, does this look like a girl's skull to you? Yeah, I didn't think so. D. In Help Wanted, Glitchtrap is heard repeating Tape Girl's voice in a distorted fashion and is faded because the Mimic is still learning how to be William. This one has some credence given that the dialogue is indeed from Tape Girl, But when that's paired with Glitchtrap's faded look, I'm far from convinced. Attributing his faded look and distorted speech as the Mimic learning how to be William isn't necessarily the correct option, when the more likely answer is that he looks and sounds that way because he's in literal pieces. Tape Girl says in her tapes that Glitchtrap attached itself to the tapes and she deliberately separated them in order to break him apart. As you gain more tapes, Glitchtrap becomes more whole and gets closer to you until finally becoming the Rabbit Man and taking over your mind. Until then, he looks faded and glitchy and can only repeat the words from the tapes he's attached to, and we know for a fact that Glitchtrap can talk due to both the coded "I always come back, let me out" message in Princess Quest, the conversation between him and Vanessa in Curse of Dreadbear.
Yes, I hear you. I know. No. There's no miscommunication. I understand. Yes. I have it. I made it myself. I think you would like it. No one suspects anything. Don't worry. I'll be ready. And I won't let you down. It will be fun.
And this line of dialogue in the Security Breach trailer.
When I first found you, you were nothing. You were small, pathetic. But now, you are more. Are you ready?
E, also in Help Wanted, Tape Girl's final tape sounds really off, and that's because Glitchtrap, aka the Mimic, is mimicking her voice to trick you. This one might have actually been true, if not for two things. One, all this is pure speculation, and two, Ruin. The books establish that the Mimic can replicate voices almost perfectly and even formulate its own responses with those voices. However, Ruin contradicts this by showing that the Mimic can only replicate specific voice lines that the characters have said and needs to splice words together if it wants to create its own sentences. The only reason it sounds genuine at first is because of an iffy signal.
Help! Something grabbed me! You won't let me go! You have to find me! I'm trapped in the sinkhole under the raceway! Roxy's the final node. You need to deactivate her.
So unless Tape Girl said these exact words in this exact order with this exact inflection, which would be pretty redundant if that was the case, whatever weight this evidence might have held no longer exists. F. The Mimic matches Burntrap's endoskeleton perfectly.
What's the difference between that ghost and me?
No, wait, don't tell me. Don't tell me! Don't tell me! I can do this! Don't tell me!
G. The Mimic and Burntrap are underground in relatively the same area, therefore they're the same.
Coincidence? I think not!
There might be some evidence that I'm either missing or haven't heard of yet, but these are the most talked about points whenever the debate is brought up. As you can see, I don't believe any of them, nor do I think there's any way I can believe them given how flimsy they are. In fact, some of these can outright be evidence for the Mimic not being Glitchtrap and Burntrap. The worst part about all this is that both sides of the fandom are so committed to their stances that they'll tear each other apart trying to prove their points when they really shouldn't need to. All we need is a simple yes or no, but because Scott's scared of answers, we will likely never get it unless he grows a spine and accepts that he can't please everyone. Then again, that can be attributed to a lot of things in this franchise. Either way, I'm gonna let Postra explain why this whole debate is incredibly stupid before we move on to the next point.
Dude, in my opinion,
It's just
right?
William.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say, in my opinion, if you have a villain who looks like William and acts like William and does all the stuff in the story that William does, and, you know, you only find out it isn't William through a book, then fuck you, it's William.
Yeah. Fuck you.
It's
nonsense.
just William.
Number 3, it further damages Vanny. I briefly alluded to this earlier, but for those who haven't played Security Breach, Vanny was criminally underutilized in that game. She had such a good build-up in both Help Wanted and Special Delivery, but in Security Breach, she's borderline non-existent. She only appears like 4 times and has such a lackluster boss fight that you'd be forgiven for thinking that she wasn't meant to be a villain. But what does that have to do with the Mimic? Well, before Ruin came out, there was always a chance that she could be redeemed, that she could have a role in the DLC that would make up for her non-existence in Security Breach, but no. Instead, she wasn't in the game at all, and we got handed the Mimic. Now all their storytelling efforts, if they have any, will be focused on it instead. Some people have theorized that they're going to try again with Cassie being the new Vanny, but I wouldn't bet on that. Another thing is, if Glitchtrap truly is the Mimic, then that damages her role in the story even more, because now instead of being Afton's protege that was going to carry on his legacy until she could bring him back, she's now just the mindless puppet of a rogue AI with no depth or character to speak of. Not to mention, it makes no sense how an AI can just upload itself into a human brain. And before any of you mentioned the Tales from the Pizzaplex story, The Monty Within, that story's a load of nonsense. It basically involves a guy being possessed by Montgomery Gator because he was electrocuted by an arcade cabinet. Some of you Tales defenders might say that Monty was already part of the guy's psyche, which makes it more believable, but even if I were to buy into that, how do you apply that to Vanessa? Glitchtrap is based on William, and Vanessa only has similarities to Elizabeth. How does that even work in any reasonable way? So in addition to leaving Vanny out to dry and die, the Mimic also complicates her whole shtick when it was relatively simple beforehand. Number 4. The Mimic is just not good. That probably sounds confusing to a lot of you, so to clarify, this section pertains to the Mimic on its own, in its own lore, as its own character. From a purely conceptual level, the Mimic isn't inherently a bad idea, but it is a tired idea. Like, it's an AI that was designed to learn and entertain, but through a series of unfortunate events, it becomes evil and wants to kill people. That's totally not a story that we haven't heard hundreds of times in the past, but hey, I can excuse a tired trope if the execution is good. However, as the part title suggests, I don't think said execution is good at all. For one, its ability to mimic is wildly inconsistent between the books and the games. There's the aforementioned recreating voices perfectly in the books, yet only mimicking specific voice lines in the games, but there's more than that. In the books, it's stated to be pretty dumb, only following its programming as a mindless robot, but in the games, it's shown to be cunning, luring Cassie along to free it from its confinement. So, is the Mimic smart, or is it dumb? You can't have it both ways. Also, it kills quite a few people in the books, and they're just outrageously gory. Like, we're talking Saw levels of excessive gore. For example, when the crew of Fazbear technicians come in to collect the Mimic, they end up finding the crumpled remains of a person in a fridge, and later, the Mimic kills all of them in increasingly disgusting ways. One of them gets their head crushed and then has their brains scooped out, one of them gets horribly mangled against a wall, and the last one gets his trachea ripped out, effectively eviscerating him, along with having his heart explode. This is in a Five Nights at Freddy's book, by the way, just thought I'd remind you. Like, I've already gone into why blood and gore doesn't inherently work in FNAF to begin with, and this is no exception. Hell, if anything, it just reinforces the idea that excessive blood and gore in FNAF is not a good thing. If this were Bendy or Poppy who have been doing gore since the start, I'd be singing a different tune, but the fact that FNAF has been so minimalistic with depicting gore makes this both jarring and unnecessary. It's almost like the author of this story saw that one Security Breach rewritten video that just spammed gore everywhere and thought, yeah, that's exactly what our current FNAF story needs. Ugh. Anyways, aside from all that, the Mimic is just nothing. It has no personality, no motive, or any real character to speak of. It's just a robot that copies what it sees and kills because someone beat it up. Truly fascinating. Despite all that though, we still haven't gotten to the thing I hate the most about this robot. And it has less to do with the Mimic itself, and more so about its fans. Number 5. The double standards. For those of you living under a rock, when Security Breach came out, nobody liked the Burn Trap reveal. FNAF 6 had given a lot of fans the perfect ending to the Afton saga, and they felt that this has effectively undone that. Yeah, it kind of already was thanks to Glitchtrap, but at the very least they were doing something new with Afton. Plus, he had Vanny as his successor, so there were solid ideas here. So when Security Breach revealed good old Willie to be back in what remains of his Springtrap body, everyone was royally pissed off. Some more than others, but just about everyone at least disliked it. In fact, I think the only person who didn't explode in anger over it was Dawko, and he can't criticize FNAF to save his life.
Ah! It's William Afton! William Afton! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god, it's William! Oh, it's Springtrap! What?
This is precisely why when the Mimic was unveiled in the books that many chose to gaslight themselves into believing that Burn Trap wasn't Afton, but rather the Mimic wearing William's corpse. Basically an extreme Copid-seed en masse. But this has also led to such fans having a massive double standard when it comes to the character of Burn Trap. When Burn Trap was Afton, they hated him. But now that there's a small chance that he could be the Mimic, those same people like him, despite zero change in his character in the games. Bear in mind, before the books established the Mimic, everything involving Burn Trap borderline confirmed him to be the return of Afton. And even after the Mimic's been established, the quote-unquote evidence for it being Burn Trap is flimsier than a piece of paper, as I previously established. given that Ruin and Help Wanted 2 had barely touched Burn Trap, aside from the former maybe retconning him from existence, Burn Trap is effectively unchanged from his first appearance, but because the Mimic stands to gaslight themselves into believing that he's not Afton, even though he very clearly is Afton, he's fine now. I don't know how else I can say it. If it walks like a rabbit, digs like a rabbit, it's a f***ing rabbit. You can try to tell me it's a shark all you want, but that doesn't mean you'll see it underwater. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a Mimic hater after all. I don't understand the true work of art that is the Mimic. It is such a well-written story and is absolutely terrifying as a completely barren endoskeleton. There's so much evidence for him being a copycat killer of William Afton despite obviously not being planned from the beginning and shouting a perfectly fine copycat killer in Vanny. It's an absolute masterpiece made by our Lord and Savior Scott Cawthon and Steel Wool. That's just perfect! Sorry about that, I might have gone a bit overboard there. That said, I'm glad I was finally able to vent about my hatred for this hunk of junk, and I hope now you guys understand my feelings towards it. Though, I would like to mention something. When the Mimic was canonized, I was mad for sure, but one of my friends suggested that I don't get too angry just yet and give it a chance. After all, it only just arrived in the games, it could always be great in another game. So I waited until Help Wanted 2 in the hopes that maybe the Mimic would win me over. But Help Wanted 2 ended up having no story whatsoever, so that was a waste of time. All in all, whatever fans see in the Mimic, I just can't. I don't see a terrifying robot with a tragic past. I don't see a cool copycat killer. Hell, I don't even see an actual character. All I see is an apology. An apology for bringing back Afton, and a plot device to do whatever Steel Wool wants it to do. Normally, I would have prefaced this video with a disclaimer saying that I respect the opinions of those who disagree, but a majority of the Mimic's fans that I've encountered, A, are totally cool with the Mimic despite it relying entirely on external media, B, share the aforementioned double standard, and C, are willing to gaslight and even force anyone who disagrees with them into liking the Mimic, regardless of any and all criticisms. So with that experience, I find it really hard to respect a lot of FNAF fans' opinions on the Mimic. But for the sake of being fair and not coming off as arrogant and entitled, so long as you're not like the examples I listed, it's totally fine if you like the Mimic. And hey, if I can respect the people who hate Nemesis with a burning passion, I can respect the people who love the Mimic with all their heart. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if so, give it all the good YouTube stuff. Next time, we'll be continuing our E-Raw Kingdom Hearts series with Rechain of Memories. And given what y'all have told me about it, I'm not particularly excited if I can be honest. But I gotta complete it as part of the promised marathon. See you next time, everybody!